The first thing Dominic noticed wasn't her, it was the way she laughed. Not loud, not exaggerated, just easy. The kind of laugh that doesn't come from trying to be happy, but from already being at peace. He hadn't heard that version of her before, or maybe he just hadn't been present enough to notice it. The cafe hadn't changed. Same window, same quiet rhythm, same soft light spilling across wooden tables like nothing in the world needed to rush. And for a second, Dominic forgot why he had come, until he saw her, Zara, sitting in the same place where everything had once begun. But this time, she wasn't alone. The man across from her leaned in slightly, his posture relaxed, his attention completely hers. Not divided, not partial. Present. Dominic didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't interrupt the moment, because something about it felt complete in a way he hadn't expected. She wasn't searching, she wasn't adjusting, she wasn't waiting to be met, she was already there. And for the first time, Dominic understood something that didn't feel like regret. It felt like timing, wrong, final, unchangeable, because everything he had learned, everything he had finally begun to understand, was showing up now. In a moment where he no longer had a place. Have you ever changed? Not just slightly, but completely. Only to realize the person you changed for had already learned how to live without you. Because that's the part no one talks about. Growth feels powerful until it arrives too late. And now, standing just a few steps away from a life he once had, Dominic wasn't asking how to fix it. He was asking something harder. Can you respect the timing? Even when your heart finally understands. If you've ever realized something too late, comment too late below. And if stories like this hit something real for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson. Because this time, it's not about losing love. It's about what happens when love comes back into your life. Different. And you're no longer the same person either. Dominic didn't plan to stop. He had passed the cafe without slowing down at least 3 times before, each time telling himself the same thing. There was no reason to go in. Not anymore. The place held memories, but memories didn't need revisiting. That's what he believed. Until the 4th time. This time, he slowed. Not intentionally, not consciously, just enough to notice the light inside, just enough to recognize something familiar. And before he could talk himself out of it, he pushed the door open. The bell chimed softly, the same sound, unchanged. For a moment, nothing felt different, until everything did. His eyes adjusted slowly, scanning the room without urgency. And then, they stopped. Zara, she sat near the window, exactly where she always used to. But she wasn't the same, not in a way that was obvious. In a way that was felt. There was no quiet searching in her posture, no subtle tension beneath her calm. She wasn't waiting for anything. And across from her, someone else was. The man wasn't extraordinary in appearance, but that wasn't what stood out. It was the way he listened, fully. No phone, no distraction, no divided attention, just presence. The kind Dominic had only recently learned to understand, too recently. Zara said something. Dominic couldn't hear what, but the man smiled in a way that wasn't automatic. It wasn't polite. It was engaged, like he understood her. And Zara, she didn't repeat herself. She didn't adjust her words. She didn't need to. Dominic stood there longer than he should have. Not staring, just witnessing, because for the first time, he wasn't imagining what she needed. He was seeing it, and it wasn't him, not anymore. He stepped back slightly, his instinct telling him to leave before the moment turned into something else. But something in him stopped that, not hope. Understanding, because this wasn't a moment to avoid, it was a moment to face. So instead, he walked forward, not directly toward her, but toward the counter, slow, measured, giving himself space to exist in the same room without disrupting what she had built. Coffee? The barista asked. Dominic nodded. Black, same as before. Some habits don't change, but people do. He waited, his hands resting lightly against the counter, his posture calm, but his mind clearer than it had been in years, because this time, he wasn't wondering what went wrong. He knew. The barista handed him the cup. Thanks, Dominic said quietly, and then, without planning to, he turned. Zara looked up. Their eyes met. Not suddenly, not sharply, just naturally, like something that didn't need to be forced. For a second, nothing moved. The room continued. The world continued. But between them, there was recognition, not of what they were, but of what they had become. Zara didn't look surprised. That was the first thing Dominic noticed. She didn't tense, didn't hesitate. She just acknowledged him. Dominic, she said. His name sounded the same, but it felt different, Hey, he replied. The man across from her turned slightly, his attention shifting. Not threatened, not defensive, just aware. Zara glanced at him briefly. This is Daniel, she said calmly. A small pause. Daniel, this is Dominic. No explanation, no history, just names. Dominic nodded once. Nice to meet you. Daniel returned it easily. You too. No tension, no hidden weight, just a normal interaction. And somehow, that made everything feel even more real. Zara looked back at Dominic. Didn't expect to see you here, she said. Dominic gave a small, honest nod. Yeah, he replied. Me neither. A faint pause. Then, you look well. Zara held his gaze for a moment. Thank you, she said. You do too. And for the first time, Dominic didn't hear that as politeness. He heard it as truth, not connected to the past, not influenced by what they had been, just present. And that was the difference. He didn't stay long, didn't sit, didn't interrupt, because he understood something now that he hadn't before. Not every moment is yours to step into. Some moments, you simply witness. I'll let you get back to it, he said. Zara nodded. Okay. And just like that, he stepped away, back toward the door, not rushed, not avoiding, just aware. As he pushed it open, the bell chimed again, the same sound, but this time, it didn't carry memory, it carried clarity, and for the first time, Dominic didn't wonder what could have been. He understood exactly what was, and somehow, that was harder to carry, but easier to accept. Dominic didn't go far. He stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him, the bell fading into the background like a memory that no longer needed to be held onto. The air felt different, cooler, clearer, or maybe he was just feeling it now. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, coffee in hand, his gaze drifting without direction. 3 years ago, he would have walked away faster. Back then, distance was something he relied on. If something didn't make sense, he moved forward until it did. But now, he didn't move. He stayed, not because he wanted to go back inside, but because he understood something he hadn't allowed himself to before. This feeling. It wasn't regret, it was recognition, and recognition doesn't disappear just because it's uncomfortable. It stays. Until you learn from it. A car passed slowly in front of him, headlights cutting briefly through the stillness. Dominic exhaled, lifting the cup slightly before taking a slow sip. It tasted the same, but he didn't drink it the same way. There was no distraction now, no background noise in his mind, just awareness. Inside the cafe, Zara laughed again. He heard it faintly through the glass, and this time, he didn't look, because he didn't need to. He had already seen enough, and for the first time, that was enough. He turned and started walking, not quickly, not with urgency, just moving, because this time, he wasn't trying to escape the moment. He was carrying it correctly. Across the street, Zara sat quietly for a second longer than usual. Daniel was saying something, something light, something easy, but her attention had shifted. Not away from him, just inward. You okay? Daniel asked. His voice was steady, not probing, just present. Zara nodded slightly. Yeah. A small pause. I just didn't expect that. Daniel followed her gaze briefly toward the door, then back to her. You know him well? He asked. Zara considered the question, not because she didn't have an answer, but because the answer had changed. I used to, she said. Daniel nodded once. He didn't ask more, didn't press, and that didn't go unnoticed. Zara picked up her cup, taking a small sip as she let the moment settle. There was no emotional rush, no confusion, just awareness. Because seeing Dominic again didn't reopen something, it confirmed something. He had changed. She could see it, not in what he said, in how he stood, how he looked at her, how he didn't try to stay. And that mattered more than it would have before. Daniel leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed. You don't have to explain anything, he said. Zara looked at him. A small pause. I know, she replied. And she did. That was the difference. There was no pressure here. No need to adjust herself to be understood. No quiet effort to make sure her words landed. She just existed, and she was met. Outside, Dominic slowed again. Not because he was unsure, but because something in him had shifted direction. Not toward the past, toward something else. Understanding doesn't give you back what you lost, but it changes how you move forward. And Dominic felt that now, not as motivation, as alignment. For years he had built everything around control, around structure, around outcomes, but this wasn't something to control. This was something to accept. He stopped briefly near the corner, looking out at the city in front of him. Everything was still moving. Nothing had changed. Except him. And for the first time, that felt real. Back in the cafe, Zara set her cup down slowly. "You're quiet," Daniel said lightly. She smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About him?" Zara shook her head gently. "No." A small pause. "About how different things feel now." Daniel studied her for a moment. "Good different?" he asked. Zara met his eyes. "Yeah," she said. "Good different." And she meant it. Because this wasn't about comparison. It wasn't about choosing between past and present. It was about recognizing what felt right, without effort. Dominic continued walking, his steps steady, his thoughts no longer scattered. He didn't replay the moment, didn't question what he could have said differently, didn't imagine alternate outcomes, because for the first time, he wasn't trying to rewrite the past. He was learning how to exist without needing to, and that was new. Later that night, Dominic sat alone in his apartment, the city lights stretching beyond his window. The same view, but not the same perspective. He leaned back slightly, his hands resting loosely in his lap. For a moment, nothing happened. No thoughts, no urgency, just stillness. Then, a realization. Quiet, clear. Zara hadn't moved on quickly. She had moved on correctly. And that difference. That was what mattered. Dominic closed his eyes briefly, exhaling slowly. There was no frustration in it, no regret, just understanding. And understanding, when it's real, doesn't make you chase. It makes you choose differently. Across town, Zara walked into her apartment, slipping off her shoes, setting her bag down with the same calm rhythm she had built her life around. There was no heaviness, no lingering emotion pulling her backward, just quiet clarity. She moved toward the window, glancing out briefly before turning away. The night didn't feel unfinished. It felt complete, not because everything had been resolved, but because everything had been understood. And somewhere between them, without speaking, without returning, they both accepted the same truth. Some love doesn't end because it wasn't real. It ends because it arrived at the wrong time. And sometimes, understanding that is the only closure you ever get. He changed, but she had already moved on. Be honest, do you think timing matters more than love? Have you ever become the right person at the wrong time? Drop "too late" in the comments if you've ever felt this, and tell me, if you were in his place, would you fight for her again, or respect that she's found peace? If this story is hitting something real for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, because this time, it's not about love alone. It's about whether love can come back. After life has already moved on, Dominic didn't see her again for a while, not because he avoided the cafe, but because he stopped expecting moments to repeat themselves. That had been one of the biggest changes. Before, he believed in patterns. If something happened once, it could happen again. Now, he understood something different. Not every moment returns. Some only exist to show you something, and then they're gone. So he didn't go back looking for her. He moved forward, not quickly, not forcefully, just intentionally. His days felt different now. Not less full, but less rushed. He listened more, paused more, not because he was trying to prove something, but because he finally understood the value of being present. And for a while, that was enough. Until it wasn't. It started subtly, a conversation that felt incomplete. Dominic sat across from Claire, her posture open, her tone warm, her attention steady. She was kind, easy to talk to. Everything about her made sense, and that was the problem. "So, what made you slow down?" she asked. Dominic leaned back slightly, considering the question. "Perspective," he said. Claire smiled. "That's vague." He gave a small nod. "Yeah, I'm still figuring out how to explain it." She tilted her head slightly. "You don't have to have the perfect answer." "I know," he said, and he did. That wasn't the issue. The issue was, no matter how present he was in the moment, something didn't connect. Not deeply, not the way it should have. Claire laughed softly at something he said a few minutes later, her expression genuine, her presence steady. Dominic watched her, not analyzing, just noticing. She was there, fully, and for the first time, he matched that. No phone, no distractions, just attention. Everything he hadn't given before, he was giving now. And still, something was missing. After dinner, they stepped outside together. "I had a good time," Claire said. Dominic nodded. "Me too." And he meant it. That was the confusing part. Nothing was wrong. Nothing felt forced. Nothing needed fixing. And yet, there was no pull, no quiet depth beneath the surface. No sense that something meaningful was forming beyond what was already there. Claire looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You're very present," she said. Dominic let out a small breath. "I'm trying to be," he replied. She smiled. "It shows." A pause. "But it also feels like you're somewhere else." That caught him slightly off guard. "Am the first?" he asked. Claire nodded gently. "Not physically," she said. A small pause. "But it feels like part of you is still processing something." Dominic didn't respond immediately. Because she wasn't wrong. He just hadn't said it out loud yet. "I think I am," he admitted. Claire studied him for a moment. "Is that something you want to talk about?" she asked. Dominic shook his head lightly. "Not yet." She nodded. "Okay. No pressure. No expectation. Just acceptance." And again. That was good. But it wasn't enough. They parted ways easily. No tension. No complication. Just a quiet understanding that the moment had been what it was. And nothing more. Later that night, Dominic sat alone again, the familiar stillness surrounding him. But this time, it felt different, because now, he wasn't just understanding the past, he was comparing it, and that comparison, it wasn't intentional, but it was real. Zara hadn't needed to create connection. It had existed naturally, without effort, without explanation, and now, even with effort, Dominic couldn't recreate it. He leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. This wasn't about her, not entirely. It was about something deeper. Connection isn't something you build alone, and no matter how much you change, you can't force it where it doesn't naturally exist. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. For the first time, he understood something that made everything clearer. Growth doesn't guarantee the same outcome. It just changes who you are when you face it again. And this time, he wasn't facing Zara. He was facing himself. Dominic didn't stop seeing Claire immediately. Not because he felt something deeper growing, but because nothing about it felt wrong. And for a while, that was enough to continue. They met again a few days later. Same kind of place. Same easy rhythm. Claire spoke about her work, her friends, the small details of her life that most people rushed past. Dominic listened, fully. He asked questions, followed her thoughts, stayed present in a way he hadn't known how to before. And this time, he noticed everything. The way she paused before answering something personal. The way her tone shifted slightly when something mattered more. The way she watched him. Not carefully, not cautiously, but openly. It was all there, clear, healthy. The kind of interaction people often describe as right. And still, something didn't deepen. Halfway through the evening, Claire set her glass down and looked at him with quiet curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Dominic nodded. "Yeah." She studied him for a second. "You're here," she said. A small pause. "But it feels like you're measuring something." Dominic didn't answer right away, because that was exactly what he was doing. Not intentionally, but constantly. "I think I am," he admitted. Claire didn't look offended, just aware. "Comparing?" she asked. Dominic hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." The honesty didn't break the moment. It clarified it. Claire leaned back slightly, her posture still relaxed. "That's hard to compete with," she said lightly. Dominic shook his head. "It's not about competition." A pause. "It's about something I didn't understand before." Claire watched him carefully. "And now you do?" Dominic exhaled slowly. "I understand what I missed," he said. Another pause. "But I don't think I understand how to replace it." Claire gave a small, thoughtful nod. "You don't replace it," she said. Dominic looked at her. "You experience something different," she added. That sounded right, but it didn't feel right. And that difference, that was what he couldn't ignore. They walked outside again afterward, the night quieter than before. Claire stopped near the curb, turning slightly toward him. "You're not ready," she said. It wasn't a question. Dominic met her eyes. "No," he replied. A small pause. "I'm not." Claire nodded. "That's okay. No frustration, no disappointment, just understanding. I like who you're becoming," she added. Dominic felt that, not as validation, as truth, but, "You're still becoming him," she finished. Another pause. "And I think you need to finish that, before you try to be that for someone else." Dominic nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I think you're right." They didn't drag the moment out. No complicated goodbye. No attempt to hold on to something that wasn't meant to continue. Just a quiet ending. Respectful. Clear. Later that night, Dominic walked home again, not because he had nowhere to be, but because walking had become something different now. A way to think, a way to feel things fully without distraction. He passed the cafe, didn't stop, didn't look inside. Not because he didn't care, because he wasn't looking for her anymore. That wasn't the point. The point was something else. He was learning how to exist without attaching meaning to every moment, without expecting something to return, without trying to recreate what had already been. And that was harder than anything else. Back in his apartment, Dominic sat near the window again, the city lights stretching endlessly in front of him. But this time, there was no question sitting behind his thoughts. Claire had been right. He wasn't ready, not because he hadn't changed, but because he was still understanding what that change actually meant. You can learn something. You can grow. You can even become better. But that doesn't mean you're ready to build something new yet. Because growth, real growth, requires time to settle. Dominic leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel behind. He felt aligned, not with the past, not with what he had lost, but with who he was becoming. And that was something he wasn't willing to rush. Across town, Zara sat quietly on her couch, her phone resting beside her, a soft lamp casting warm light across the room. Daniel had texted earlier. Nothing complicated, just something simple. I had a good time today. Zara smiled faintly, typing a response. Me too. No overthinking, no hesitation, just ease. And as she set her phone down, she realized something without needing to analyze it. This didn't feel like something she had to build. It felt like something she could simply be in, and for the first time in a long time. That felt enough. Between them, without speaking, two different paths continued, not crossing, not competing, just unfolding, and somewhere within that space, the story wasn't about who they used to be anymore. It was about who they were becoming. Separately, and whether that would ever matter. Again, Zara didn't fall in love with Daniel, not at first. What she felt was something quieter, steady, the kind of feeling that doesn't rush ahead of itself, that doesn't try to prove anything, that doesn't ask to be defined too early. And after everything she had experienced, that felt right. They didn't see each other every day. There was no urgency in it, no need to constantly connect. But when they did meet, there was presence, not the kind that had to be requested, the kind that was already there. One evening, they sat across from each other at a small restaurant, the lighting soft, the noise around them distant. Daniel was talking about something simple, a project he was working on, something that mattered to him but didn't need to sound impressive. Zara listened, not because she had to, because she wanted to, and as she watched him speak, she noticed something that felt familiar. But in a different way. He wasn't trying to be understood. He was just expressing, and somehow, that made it easier to understand him. You're quiet, Daniel said, a small smile forming. Zara blinked lightly. Just listening, she replied. He leaned back slightly. That's rare, he said. A pause. Most people listen to respond. Zara smiled faintly. I used to, she said. Daniel tilted his head slightly. What changed? Zara considered the question, not because she didn't have an answer, but because the answer wasn't just one moment. It stopped working, she said simply. Daniel nodded once. That makes sense. There was no need to explain further. No pressure to unpack everything. And that mattered. Zara picked up her glass, taking a small sip as the moment settled naturally. She didn't feel like she had to guide the conversation, didn't feel like she had to keep it alive. It moved on its own. And that was new. Because with Dominic, she had always been aware of the space, aware of whether it was being held or slipping. Here, she didn't think about it. It just existed. That difference wasn't loud, but it was real. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Can I ask you something? He said. Zara nodded. Yeah. He studied her for a moment. You seem settled, he said. A small pause. Not in a way that feels finished, he added. In a way that feels intentional. Zara let out a small breath. That's a good way to describe it, she said. Daniel smiled slightly. Was it always like that? Zara shook her head gently. No. Another pause. It took time to get here. Daniel nodded. I figured there was something in the way he said that. Not curious, not probing, just respectful of the fact that there was a story behind it, and he didn't need to know all of it. To understand enough, Zara leaned back slightly, her posture relaxed. You don't ask a lot of questions, she said. Daniel smiled. I ask the ones that matter, he replied. A small pause. And I let the rest come when it's ready. That landed, not as something impressive, as something aligned. Zara nodded slowly. That's rare too, she said. The conversation shifted naturally after that. Not forced, not structured, just flowing, and for the first time in a long time. Zara wasn't aware of what was missing, because nothing felt like it was. Later that night, she walked home, alone. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. The air was cool, the city quiet in a way that felt grounding, and as she walked, she didn't replay the evening, didn't analyze what it meant. She just felt it, and what she felt was simple. Ease, not excitement, not intensity, just ease, and after everything she had experienced, that felt more valuable than anything else. Across the city, Dominic sat in his apartment again, but this time, he wasn't thinking about Zara, not directly. He was thinking about something else, the difference between connection and compatibility, because, for the first time, he understood that they weren't the same. You can be compatible with someone, have ease, have understanding, and still not feel that deeper connection, and you can have connection without knowing how to sustain it. He had experienced both, just not at the same time. Dominic leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. That realization didn't frustrate him. It clarified something, because now, he wasn't trying to recreate what he had with Zara. He was trying to understand what it actually was, and whether it could ever exist again. In a way that lasted, and somewhere in that thought, a quieter question began to form, not about her, about himself. If I understand it now, can I hold on to it differently next time? And for the first time, that question didn't feel like pressure, it felt like possibility. Zara didn't notice the shift immediately, because nothing changed in a way that demanded attention. Daniel was still the same, steady, present, easy to be with, and she was still at peace. But sometimes, the absence of conflict makes it easier to hear something quieter. It happened on a simple afternoon, no special occasion, no emotional build-up. They were walking side by side through a small park, the kind of place people pass through without really thinking about it. Trees, scattered benches, soft movement of people living their lives, nothing significant. And yet, Zara felt something, not discomfort, not doubt, just awareness. Daniel was talking about something again, something light, something steady, and Zara was listening. But this time, she noticed something different. She wasn't leaning in, not emotionally. She was present, but not pulled, and that distinction, it didn't feel wrong, but it felt real. Hey, Daniel said, breaking the quiet rhythm slightly. Zara looked at him. You're thinking again. A small smile touched her lips. I do that sometimes. Daniel smiled back. I've noticed. A pause. Want to share? He asked. Zara hesitated, not because she was hiding something, because she was still understanding it. I think I'm figuring something out, she said slowly. Daniel nodded. Okay, no pressure, just space. Zara took a small breath. I feel good with you, she said. Daniel's expression stayed steady. That's a good start, he replied lightly. Zara smiled faintly. It is, she agreed. A pause. But I don't think I feel more than that yet. The words didn't come out heavy. They didn't need to, because they were honest. Daniel didn't react immediately. He didn't pull away, didn't tense. He just processed, then nodded. Okay, he said. No disappointment layered into it. No hidden expectation. Just understanding. Zara watched him for a moment. You're not upset? She asked. Daniel shook his head gently. No. A small pause. I'd rather you be honest about where you are than try to be somewhere you're not. That landed softly, but deeply. Zara nodded slowly. That's fair. They continued walking. Not awkward, not strained, just aware. And that was the difference. This wasn't something she had to manage. It was something she could simply acknowledge. But as they moved forward, that awareness stayed, because now that she had noticed it, she couldn't unfeel it. Later that evening, Zara sat alone in her apartment, her legs tucked beneath her, the room quiet around her. She wasn't restless. She wasn't confused. She was thinking clearly. Daniel felt right, safe, steady, but something inside her remained still, not closed, just unmoved. And that wasn't something she could ignore. Because she had spent too much time in the past trying to understand what wasn't being felt, she wasn't going to do that again. Across the city, Dominic sat in a different kind of quiet, not reflective, focused. He had been working, but not in the way he used to, not to avoid something, but to build something with intention. And yet, every now and then, a thought would surface, not about Zara directly, but about something connected to her, the way she had felt, the way he hadn't understood it, and the way he would recognize it now. If it ever showed up again. Dominic leaned back slightly, staring out at the city lights. For the first time, he didn't want to rush into anything new. He didn't want to prove that he had changed. He wanted to live it fully, because now he understood something that had taken him years to learn. You don't prove growth by saying it. You prove it by how you show up. Consistently. And that meant waiting, not for Zara, for the right moment. With the right understanding, back in her apartment, Zara stood near the window, her arms resting lightly against the frame as she looked out into the night. There was no pull toward the past, no confusion about what had been, but there was a quiet question forming. Not urgent, just present. If something feels right, but doesn't move you, is that enough? And somewhere across the city, without knowing it, Dominic was asking a different question. If something once moved you deeply, but you didn't know how to hold it, do you deserve another chance to? And between those two questions, the space between them began to shift again, not because they were reaching for each other, but because they were both changing in ways that might matter. Later, Zara didn't rush her decision. She never had. That was something she had learned the hard way. That clarity doesn't come faster just because you want it to. So she didn't pull away from Daniel. She didn't lean in either. She stayed honest. And honesty, she had learned, had its own rhythm. It reveals things slowly, but clearly. A few days later, they met again. This time, it wasn't a planned dinner or something intentional. Just a simple coffee. The same kind of moment that used to hold so much weight in her life, but now felt lighter. Daniel was already there when she arrived. He looked up, his expression softening when he saw her. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Zara sat across from him, placing her bag gently beside her. There was no tension from their last conversation, no awkwardness, just awareness, and that made everything easier. "How's your week been?" he asked. "Good," she replied. A small pause, quiet. Daniel smiled slightly. "I like quiet," he said. Zara nodded. "Me too." The conversation moved naturally after that. No effort, no forced depth. Just two people meeting each other where they were. And yet, Zara noticed something again. Not in him, in herself. She wasn't holding back, but she wasn't opening further either. She was exactly where she had been days ago. And that consistency, it told her something. Feelings that grow, shift, they deepen, they expand without being pushed. And hers weren't. That wasn't confusion. That was clarity. Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "You're thinking again," he said lightly. Zara smiled faintly. "Yeah." A pause. "I think I know what it is now." Daniel nodded. "Okay." No tension, no anticipation, just space. Zara took a small breath. "I like being around you," she said. Daniel held her gaze. "I like being around you too." A quiet pause. "But I don't think this is going to become more than that," she continued. The words were steady, not rushed, not heavy, just true. Daniel didn't look surprised. Not really. He leaned back slightly, absorbing it. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I felt that too." Zara studied him. "You did?" He nodded. "You're present," he said. A small pause. "But not invested in that way." Zara let out a soft breath. That's exactly it. There was no disappointment between them, no sense of loss, just understanding. And that made the moment feel complete. "I appreciate you being honest," Daniel said. Zara nodded. "I didn't want to stay in something that wasn't growing." Daniel smiled slightly. "That's fair." A pause. "Most people don't realize that until much later," he added. Zara held his gaze. "I used to be one of those people." Daniel nodded. "Not anymore." And just like that, they let it go. No drama, no emotional weight, just clarity. They finished their coffee, their conversation shifting back to something lighter, something easier. Because not everything that ends has to feel like something was lost. Sometimes it just means it wasn't meant to grow further. Later that afternoon, Zara walked out of the cafe alone. The air felt the same, the world moved the same. But something inside her had settled. Not because she had chosen something, but because she had chosen not to force something. And that mattered more. Across the city, Dominic stepped into a different kind of space. A bookstore. Quiet. Still. Not the kind of place he used to spend time in. But lately, he found himself drawn to places that didn't demand anything from him. He walked slowly between the shelves, his fingers brushing lightly against the spines of books without stopping. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just being there, That was new. A few feet away, someone shifted slightly. Dominic glanced up and paused, not because he recognized the person, but because of the moment. Zara. She stood near the window, flipping through a book, her posture relaxed, her expression calm, alone, not with Daniel, just herself. Dominic didn't move immediately. Not out of hesitation, out of awareness. This wasn't the same moment as before. This wasn't something he had stumbled into. This was something that was open, not an opportunity. A moment, and how he approached it would matter. For a second, he considered walking away, not because he didn't want to speak to her, but because he didn't want to step into something without understanding it. But then, he remembered something. Growth isn't just about knowing when to step back. It's about knowing when to step forward. Differently. So this time, he did. Dominic didn't rush. That was the first difference. Before, he would have crossed the distance quickly, filling the space with words before the moment had a chance to settle. Now, he moved slowly, not to hesitate, to arrive, intentionally. Zara turned the page of the book in her hand, her attention still on the lines in front of her. She hadn't noticed him yet. And for a second, Dominic just stood there, not watching her, recognizing something. She looked the same, but not in the way he used to define it, not familiar, not tied to memory. She looked complete, not waiting, not searching, just present. That used to confuse him. Now, he understood it. Zara. His voice was calm, not loud, not cautious, just there. She looked up, and for a brief moment, her expression shifted, not surprise, recognition. Dominic. No hesitation, no discomfort, just acknowledgement. A small pause settled between them. Not empty, not heavy, balanced. Didn't expect to see you here, she said. Her tone was neutral, not distant, just real. Dominic gave a slight nod. Yeah, he replied. Same. Another pause. Zara closed the book gently, her fingers resting on the cover as she studied him for a moment. You look different, she said. Dominic let out a small breath. I am. No explanation, no performance, just truth. Zara nodded once. I can see that. That landed quietly, because she wasn't reacting to what he was saying. She was responding to what she could feel, and that difference mattered. Dominic shifted slightly, his hands resting loosely at his sides. Can I sit for a minute? He asked. It wasn't assumed, it wasn't implied, it was offered. Zara glanced toward the small seating area near the window, then back at him. Okay. They moved to the chairs, not close, not distant, just enough space to exist comfortably. Dominic sat back, his posture relaxed but present. Zara mirrored that naturally. No one was trying to control the moment. And because of that, it didn't feel like something fragile. It felt grounded. I didn't expect to see you again so soon, Dominic said. Zara tilted her head slightly. Soon? She repeated. A faint pause. It's been a while. Dominic nodded. Yeah, he said. I guess it just feels different now. Zara studied him. Different how? Dominic didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't know, because he wanted to say it clearly. Before, he said slowly, I didn't really see what was happening while it was happening. Zara didn't interrupt. And now, I do, he added. A quiet pause. Zara leaned back slightly, her gaze steady. That's a big shift, she said. It is, Dominic replied. No hesitation, no defense, just acknowledgement. Another pause settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Zara glanced down briefly at the book in her hand, then back up. I'm glad you got there, she said. The words were simple, but they carried something real, not for herself. For him, Dominic nodded. Me too. A small silence followed. Then, how have you been? He asked. Zara considered the question, not in a complicated way, just honestly. Good, she said. A pause. Clear. Dominic held that word for a moment. Clear is good, he said. Zara gave a faint nod. It is. Another pause. Then, I'm not seeing Daniel anymore, she added. The sentence came naturally, not as an announcement, just context. Dominic didn't react immediately, not because it didn't register, because he didn't want to respond from assumption. Oh, he said simply. A small pause. Okay. Zara watched him. You're not going to ask why? She said. Dominic shook his head lightly. No. Another pause. If you want to tell me, you will. Zara's expression softened slightly. That's new, she said. Dominic gave a faint smile. Yeah, he admitted. I'm trying to understand things without forcing them. Zara nodded slowly. That's better. Not praise, recognition. And for the first time, Dominic didn't feel like he needed more than that. The light from the window shifted slightly, casting softer shadows across the space. The moment felt open, not returning to the past, not rushing toward anything new, just existing, and, for both of them. That was unfamiliar in the best way. Dominic leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. "I'm not here to go backward," he said. Zara met his eyes. "I know. He paused briefly. "I didn't want to ignore a moment that felt real." Zara held his gaze. "This feels real," she said. A quiet pause. "Because we're not trying to make it anything." Dominic nodded. "Exactly. And for the first time, they were in the same kind of moment, not defined by what they used to be, not shaped by what they lost, but by what they were, right now, two people who had changed, and were finally meeting each other as they were. They met again, not as who they used to be, but as who they've become. Do you believe people can truly change and meet again differently? Or, once something ends, should it stay in the past? Be honest. If you were Zara, would you open that door again? Or protect your peace? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. And if this story is pulling you in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson, because what happens next might change everything. Chapter 5. Part 1. They didn't make plans. That was the first thing that made it different. No, we should catch up soon. No. Let's do this again. Just a moment that ended, naturally, and that was enough, or at least, that's what they both told themselves. A few days passed. Life continued in its quiet rhythm. Zara returned to her routines. Work, evenings, small, intentional spaces where she didn't feel the need to fill silence with noise. And Dominic. He did the same, but something had shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way that disrupted anything. Just slightly, enough to be noticed. It wasn't about seeing her again. It wasn't about trying to. It was about the fact that the moment hadn't felt finished. Not unresolved. Just open, and open things have a way of staying with you. Not loudly, but consistently. Zara noticed it first, not as a thought, as a pause. She was sitting at her desk, reviewing something she had already read twice, when her attention drifted. Not far, just enough to notice something else. The bookstore, the conversation, the way Dominic had spoken. Not trying, just present. That hadn't been familiar. That had been new, and new things. They don't demand attention, but they invite it. Zara leaned back slightly in her chair, exhaling quietly. She wasn't confused. She wasn't questioning her decision with Daniel. That had been clear. But this was something else. Not a return. A shift. Across the city, Dominic was in the middle of a meeting. Numbers, plans, structure, everything he used to rely on to stay grounded. And yet, for a brief moment, his focus slipped. Not completely, just enough. Because something in him had recognized a pattern he hadn't allowed himself to see before. The difference between closure and continuation. What he had with Zara before. That had ended. But what had happened in the bookstore? That wasn't a continuation of the past. It was something else. Something new. And that difference mattered. Dominic brought his attention back to the meeting, finishing what needed to be done with the same calm presence he had been building. But when it ended, he didn't move immediately. He sat there for a second longer, thinking, not about what to do, but about what not to force. That evening, Zara stopped by a small grocery store on her way home. Nothing unusual, nothing planned, just part of her routine. She moved through the aisles slowly, picking up what she needed without rushing, and then she paused, not because she saw him, but because she felt something familiar before she confirmed it. Dominic stood a few feet away, reaching for something on the shelf. He hadn't noticed her yet. Zara didn't move, not frozen, just aware. This wasn't like before. This wasn't unexpected. It felt natural, like something that didn't need explanation. Dominic turned slightly. Their eyes met, and this time, there was no pause of recognition, no moment of adjustment, just ease. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Same tone, same calm, but something about it felt different, less distant, more familiar. Not because of the past, because of the present. "You live around here?" Dominic asked. Zara nodded. "Yeah, you." "Closer than I used to," he replied. A small pause. "That's probably a good thing," she said. Dominic gave a faint smile. "Yeah," he said. "I think it is." They stood there for a second longer, neither rushing to leave, neither trying to extend the moment unnecessarily. Just allowing it. Do you need anything? Zara asked, gesturing slightly toward his basket. Dominic glanced down. I think I've got everything. A pause. You, almost, she said. Another small silence. But this one, it didn't feel like something that needed to be filled. It felt comfortable, and that was new. Dominic shifted slightly. I'll let you finish, he said. Zara nodded. Okay. No hesitation, no expectation, just understanding. They moved in opposite directions, not because they had to, because that's where they were going. And for the first time, that didn't feel like distance. It felt like timing, still unfolding, not forced, not decided, just happening. Chapter 5, Part 2. Zara didn't think about the grocery store moment right away, not because it didn't matter, because it didn't need to be analyzed. That was something she had learned. Not every interaction requires meaning. Some just reveal it. She unpacked her groceries later that evening, moving through her space with the same quiet rhythm she had built over time. Everything felt normal, grounded, and yet something lingered, not as a thought, as a feeling, ease, not excitement, not confusion, just ease. And that was what made it different. Because ease with Dominic had never been something she could rely on before. It had always required effort, adjustment, awareness. Now, so, it didn't. Zara paused briefly, her hand resting against the counter as she noticed that shift more clearly. It wasn't about what could happen next. It was about what was happening now. And right now, there was no tension, no unfinished weight, just something. Open. Across the city, Dominic sat at his desk, a document open in front of him that he hadn't read in the last 5 minutes. His focus had drifted again, not far, just enough. Because something in him had recognized the same thing Zara had, the absence of pressure. That was new. Before, every interaction between them had carried weight, expectations, misunderstandings, things unsaid but deeply felt. Now, there was none of that. And instead of feeling uncertain, it felt clear. Dominic leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. He wasn't trying to interpret it. He wasn't asking what it meant, because for the first time, he understood something important. Not everything needs to be defined immediately. Some things just need to be experienced. A few days passed, no messages, no calls. Not because either of them was avoiding the other, because neither of them felt the need to force connection. And yet, when they saw each other again, it didn't feel random. It felt expected. This time, it was at the bookstore again. Zara stood near the same window, a different book in her hands, her posture relaxed. Dominic noticed her from across the room, and this time, he didn't hesitate. Not because he was certain of anything, because he wasn't overthinking it. He walked over. Hey! Zara looked up, a small smile forming. Hey! The same exchange, but now, it felt easier, more natural. You come here a lot now? He asked. Zara nodded slightly. I like the quiet. Dominic glanced around. Yeah, he said. It's different. Zara tilted her head slightly. Different? How? Dominic thought about it for a second. It doesn't expect anything from you, he said. Zara nodded slowly. That's why I like it. A small pause. Most places don't feel like that. Dominic gave a faint nod. No, he said. They don't. Another quiet moment settled between them. But this time, it didn't feel like something temporary. It felt familiar, not from the past, from now. Zara closed her book gently. Do you want to sit? She asked. It wasn't loaded. It wasn't an invitation with expectations. Just a moment being extended. Dominic nodded. Yeah. They moved to the seating area again. The same space, but a different dynamic. They sat across from each other, the window beside them letting in soft light. No one rushed to speak. And this time, that silence felt shared. Not empty, not avoided, just present. Dominic leaned back slightly. This feels different, he said. Zara looked at him. Yeah, she replied. A pause. It does. Dominic studied her for a moment. Not in a complicated way, he added. Zara shook her head gently. No, she said. Not complicated. Another pause. Just lighter. Dominic nodded. Yeah, lighter. And for both of them, that word carried something they hadn't had before. Not because they didn't care, but because they weren't carrying the same weight. Dominic rested his hands loosely together. I'm not trying to figure out where this goes, he said. Zara's expression softened slightly. Good, she replied. Neither am I. A small silence followed. Then, that's probably why it feels like this, she added. Dominic nodded. Yeah, he said. I think so too. And for the first time, they were in the same kind of moment. Without expectation, without pressure, without trying to fix what had already been, just allowing something new to exist. Not defined, not labeled, but real. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. Again, not as a second chance, but as something entirely different, something that doesn't need to be compared. Because it was never the same to begin with. They didn't talk every day. That was intentional, not something they agreed on. Just something that happened naturally. Because neither of them was trying to fill space, they were letting it exist. But when they did meet, it felt consistent, not intense, not uncertain, just steady, and over time. That steadiness began to reveal something deeper, not in big moments, in small ones. One evening they walked side by side along a quiet street, the kind of place where conversations didn't have to compete with noise. The air was cool, the city slower, neither of them was in a hurry. You've changed your pace, Zara said. Dominic glanced at her briefly. My pace? Zara nodded. You don't move through things the same way anymore. Dominic thought about that. I think I stopped trying to get somewhere, he said. Zara's expression shifted slightly. Not surprised, recognizing. That makes sense, she replied. A small pause. You used to, she added. Dominic let out a quiet breath. Yeah, I did. He didn't defend it, didn't explain it. He just acknowledged it. And that was new. They walked a little further in silence. But this silence, it wasn't empty. It held something. Comfort. Dominic glanced ahead, then back at her. I've been thinking about something, he said. Zara tilted her head slightly. Okay. Another pause. About the difference between understanding something and actually living it, he continued. Zara listened, not interrupting. I understood what I did wrong before, he said. A small pause. But I don't think I knew how to show up differently yet. Zara nodded slowly. That takes time, she said. Dominic gave a faint nod. Yeah, I'm starting to see that now. Another quiet moment passed. Zara glanced at him. You're not trying to prove it anymore, she said. Dominic looked at her. No, he replied. I think I was, at first. A pause. But that's not the same as actually changing. Zara's expression softened slightly. No, she said. It's not. That understanding settled between them. Not heavy, just clear. They reached a corner and slowed slightly, neither of them signaling they needed to go yet. I've been thinking about something too, Zara said. Dominic turned his attention fully to her. What? She hesitated for a second, not because she was unsure, because she wanted to say it honestly. I don't feel the same way I used to, she said. Dominic nodded. I wouldn't expect you to. Zara held his gaze. That's not what I mean. A pause. I don't feel guarded around you anymore. That landed differently. Dominic didn't respond right away, because that wasn't something he expected. That's good, he said carefully. Zara nodded. It is. Another pause. But it's also new. Dominic understood that, because new things, they don't come with certainty. They come with awareness. I don't know what this is, she added. Dominic gave a small nod. Me, neither. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a problem. It felt honest. They stood there for a moment longer, the city moving quietly around them. Neither of them rushed to define anything. Neither of them stepped away. They just stayed, and in that space, something continued to build. Not quickly, not loudly, but steadily. The kind of thing that doesn't need to be forced, because it's already happening. And for both of them, that was unfamiliar. In the best way, they didn't decide anything that night. No label, no direction, no quiet agreement about what this was becoming. And somehow, that made it more real, because neither of them was trying to define something they were still learning to feel. The days that followed didn't look different on the outside. Zara moved through her routines, work, evenings, small, intentional spaces that still belonged entirely to her. Dominic did the same. Meetings, quiet moments, time that no longer felt like something to fill, but something to experience. But between them, something had shifted, not into something defined, into something consistent. They began to see each other more often, not planned, not scheduled, just happening. A coffee that turned into a walk, a short conversation that lasted longer than expected, a moment that extended without either of them trying to hold on to it. And in those moments, they noticed something. Nothing felt forced. There was no effort to be understood, no quiet adjustment, no sense that one of them was carrying more of the connection than the other. It just existed. One evening they sat on a bench overlooking the city, the sky fading into softer tones as the day settled. Zara leaned back slightly, her hands resting loosely in her lap. Dominic sat beside her, not too close, not distant. The silence between them stretched, but this time, it held something. Not tension, not uncertainty, just presence. Dominic glanced at her. I used to think silence meant something was missing, he said. Zara turned her head slightly. What do you think now? She asked. Dominic let out a small breath. I think it depends on how it feels. A pause, and this doesn't feel like something's missing. Zara nodded slowly. No, she said. It doesn't. Another quiet moment passed. Then, I ended things with Daniel because I didn't feel more, Zara said. Her tone was calm, not emotional, just clear. Dominic didn't react immediately. He didn't lean into it, didn't attach meaning to it. He just listened. That made sense to me, he said after a moment. Zara glanced at him. You're not going to ask if this is about you, she said. Dominic shook his head slightly. No. A pause. Because I don't think it is. Zara held his gaze for a second longer. It's not, she said. And that mattered, because this wasn't about replacing something. It wasn't about choosing between past and present. It was about understanding where she was, and where she wasn't. Dominic leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. I don't want this to feel like something that's trying to fix what we had, he said. Zara nodded. Me neither. Another pause. This has to be different, she added. Dominic looked at her. It already is. And that wasn't hope. It was observation, because they weren't trying to recreate something. They weren't stepping back into old roles. They were meeting each other without the weight of what had been, and that changed everything. Zara leaned back slightly, her gaze drifting toward the city lights below. I don't feel like I have to protect myself around you anymore, she said. Dominic felt that, not as relief, as responsibility. I won't take that lightly, he replied. Zara nodded once. I know, and for the first time, she did, not because of what he said, because of how he had been showing up, consistently. That was the difference. Not one moment, not one conversation, a pattern, and patterns. They build trust, the kind that doesn't need to be questioned. They sat there a little longer, not talking, not needing to, just being, and for the first time, neither of them was thinking about what this would become. They were just in it, and that was something they had never truly had before, not because it didn't exist, because they hadn't known how to hold it. Now, they were learning, slowly, without rushing, without forcing, just allowing, and somewhere in that space, something deeper began to form, not loudly, not urgently, but in a way that felt steady enough to last, if they chose it, and this time, choice mattered. Nothing changed overnight. That was the first sign it was real. No sudden shift, no overwhelming emotion, no moment where everything suddenly became clear, just continuation. And, in that continuation, something deeper started to take shape. Zara didn't wake up one morning and feel differently. She noticed it in smaller ways. The way she no longer questioned his presence. The way she didn't prepare herself before seeing him. The way she didn't think about what to say, or how it would land. She just showed up. And he met her there. That was new, not the connection. The consistency. One afternoon they sat together in the same cafe again. The same place where things had once begun, and quietly ended. But this time, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like something entirely separate. Dominic rested his hands around his cup, his posture relaxed, his attention fully on her. Zara noticed that, not because she was checking for it, because she no longer had to. You don't drift anymore, she said. Dominic looked at her. I used to. Zara gave a small nod. You were there, but not fully. Dominic let out a quiet breath. Yeah, he admitted. I didn't know how to be. Zara studied him for a moment. You do now, she said. Dominic didn't respond right away, because that wasn't something he wanted to claim. I'm learning, he said. Zara nodded. That's enough. And for the first time, it was a quiet pause settled between them. But this time, it didn't feel like something fragile. It felt steady. Dominic leaned back slightly. I used to think effort was enough, he said. Zara tilted her head slightly. What do you think now? Dominic thought about it. I think effort without awareness doesn't really reach the other person, he said. Zara nodded slowly. That's true. Another pause. And awareness without consistency doesn't build anything either, he added. Zara held his gaze. That's also true. A small silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It felt like something being built. Not rushed, not forced, just forming. Zara glanced down briefly, then back at him. I don't feel like I'm waiting anymore, she said. Dominic didn't interrupt. I used to feel like I had to see if things would change, she continued. A small pause. Now I just see what is. Dominic absorbed that, and for the first time, he didn't feel like he had to prove anything in response. That's fair, he said quietly. Zara watched him. You're not trying to convince me of anything, she said. Dominic shook his head. No. A pause. I don't think that works. Zara's expression softened. No, she said. It doesn't. And that was the difference. Before, everything between them had carried weight. Now, it carried clarity. Dominic glanced out the window briefly, then back at her. I don't want this to feel like something I'm trying to earn, he said. Zara leaned back slightly. It doesn't. Another pause. But that doesn't mean it's automatic either, she added. Dominic nodded. I know. And he did. Because this wasn't about going back. It was about choosing something new. With awareness. Zara studied him for a moment longer. You're different in a way that feels stable, she said. Dominic let out a small breath. That's what I've been working on, he admitted. Zara nodded. It shows. That landed quietly, not as validation, as recognition, and for the first time, Dominic didn't feel like he needed more than that. They sat there a little longer, the cafe moving softly around them, but between them, there was something steady, not undefined anymore, not rushed into meaning, just understood, and for both of them, that was enough. For now, Chapter 7, Part 2. They didn't name it. That was the second sign it was real. Because anything they tried to label too early would have pulled it back into something familiar, something they had already lived through. And this needed space to be different. The days between their meetings became quieter in a new way. Not empty, not waiting, just settled. Zara noticed it first in how she moved through her evenings. She wasn't anticipating seeing him. She wasn't replaying their conversations. She wasn't holding on to anything. And yet, when he appeared again, it felt natural, like something that belonged. That difference mattered, because before, everything had felt like it needed to be held together. Now, nothing felt like it could fall apart. One evening, they walked again. Not planned, not discussed. They had just run into each other near the same quiet street they had walked before, and instead of pausing, they kept moving, side by side. No question of whether it made sense. It just did. You don't feel like someone I used to know anymore, Zara said. Dominic glanced at her. That's good or bad? Zara thought about it. Neither, she said. A small pause. It just feels new. Dominic nodded slowly. That's what I was hoping for, he admitted. Zara looked at him. You hoped for that? Dominic gave a small, honest nod. I didn't want to come back into your life as the same person, he said. A pause. And I didn't want this to feel like something we were continuing. Zara held his gaze. It doesn't, she said. Another pause. It feels separate. Dominic exhaled slightly. Yeah, that's what it feels like to me too. They walked a little further in silence. But this silence, it carried something different. Not comfort alone. Something deeper. Zara slowed slightly, her steps becoming more measured. There's something I've been thinking about, she said. Dominic turned his attention fully to her. What? She hesitated briefly, not because she was unsure, but because she understood the weight of what she was about to say. I don't feel afraid of this, she said. Dominic didn't respond right away, because that wasn't something small. That's new, she added. Dominic nodded. I know. A quiet pause settled between them. Before, she continued, there was always a part of me that was aware. Dominic understood what she meant. Not fully, not then, but now. He did. I didn't know how to hold that, he said. Zara glanced at him. I know. No blame, no distance, just acknowledgement. And now? He asked. Zara looked ahead, then back at him. Now it doesn't feel like something I have to hold, she said. A pause. It feels like something that just exists. Dominic let that settle, because that was the difference between effort and alignment. He slowed slightly, matching her pace without thinking about it. I don't want to rush this, he said. Zara nodded. Me neither. Another pause. But I also don't want to pretend it's nothing, she added. Dominic looked at her. I'm not pretending, he said. Zara held his gaze. Good. Because neither of them needed to say what this was becoming. They could feel it, and for the first time, feeling it didn't come with uncertainty. It came with clarity. They reached the end of the street and stopped. Not because they had to, because the moment naturally settled there. Zara shifted slightly, her arms resting loosely by her sides. "This is different," she said again. Dominic nodded. "Yeah." A small pause. "And I don't want to lose that by trying to define it too soon." Zara studied him for a moment. "You won't," she said. Dominic gave a faint smile. "That's reassuring." Zara smiled slightly in return. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't." And that was the closest either of them had come. Oh, to saying what they both already knew, not out loud, but clearly. They didn't step closer. They didn't move away. They just stood there. In something that didn't need to be rushed. Because it was already forming, and this time, they weren't trying to catch up to it. They were moving with it, slowly, intentionally, together, in a way they had never known how to before. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no moment where everything suddenly became clear. No confession. No turning point that changed everything at once. Because this time, everything had been changing slowly, and that made it real. Zara didn't wake up one day and decide. She noticed it in smaller ways. The way she didn't question his consistency anymore. The way she didn't prepare herself before seeing him. The way she felt calm, not careful, and calm. That was something she had learned to trust. Dominic noticed it too. Not as a shift in her behavior, as a shift in himself. He wasn't trying to hold the moment anymore. He wasn't trying to make sure things stayed on track. He just showed up. And for the first time, that felt enough. They met again at the bookstore, the same place that had quietly reopened something between them. Zara stood near the window, the light falling softly across her face. Dominic approached without hesitation. "Hey, hey," same tone, same ease, but this time, there was something more settled beneath it. "Do you want to walk?" he asked. Zara nodded. Yeah, no pause, no overthinking, just agreement. They stepped outside together, the air cool, the street calm. They walked without speaking at first, not because they didn't have anything to say, but because they didn't need to rush into it. After a while, Zara slowed slightly. "I've been thinking," she said. Dominic turned his attention fully to her. "Okay." A small pause. "About what this is," she added. Dominic didn't interrupt. He didn't try to define it first. He just listened. Zara took a small breath. "It doesn't feel like a second chance," she said. Dominic nodded slowly. "Yeah," he replied. "It doesn't." Another pause. "It feels separate," she continued, "like something new." Dominic held her gaze. "That's what I was hoping for," he said. Zara studied him. "You're not trying to go back," she said. Dominic shook his head. "No." A pause. "I wouldn't know how to do that without repeating the same mistakes." Zara nodded slowly. "That's what I needed to hear." The words weren't emotional, but they carried weight, because this wasn't about what they felt. It was about how they understood it. They continued walking. The rhythm of their steps naturally aligned. No adjustment, no effort, just matching. After a moment, Dominic spoke again. "I don't expect anything from this," he said. Zara looked at him. "I know." A small pause. "But I also don't want to ignore it," he added. Zara nodded. "Me neither." Another quiet moment passed. "I think the difference now," she said, "is that we're not trying to make it work." Dominic let out a small breath. "Yeah," he said, "we're just seeing if it does." And that was the shift, not effort, alignment. They reached the same corner where they had stopped before, but this time, it didn't feel like a pause. It felt like a moment. Zara turned slightly toward him. "I'm not afraid of this," she said. Dominic met her eyes. "I know." A small pause. "And I'm not trying to rush it either." Zara nodded. "That's why I'm still here." The words were simple, but they said everything. Dominic didn't step closer. He didn't reach for her. Because this wasn't a moment to take, it was a moment to understand. And understanding, this time, meant patience. Zara held his gaze for a second longer, then gave a small, steady nod. And that was enough. Because they both knew something now that they hadn't before. This wasn't about getting another chance. It was about choosing something new. Carefully. And this time, they weren't choosing out of emotion alone. They were choosing with awareness. And that changed everything. They didn't make it official. No conversation about what they were. No agreement. No definition placed on something that didn't need one yet. And that was the final difference. Because before, they had tried to understand everything too early. Tried to move faster than they were ready for. Now, they let it be. Days turned into weeks. Not dramatically, just naturally. They saw each other often enough for it to matter, but not so much that it felt forced. There was space, and within that space, there was consistency. Zara noticed it first in the smallest way. One evening, she had a long day, nothing overwhelming, just draining. She didn't reach out to Dominic. She didn't expect anything, and yet, later that night, there he was. Not because she called him, not because he needed something, because he thought of her and showed up. "Hey," he said, standing at her door, his tone soft, his presence steady. Zara looked at him for a moment, not surprised, just aware. "You didn't text," she said. Dominic gave a small shrug. "I didn't want to interrupt your day," he replied. A pause. "But I wanted to see you." Zara stepped aside. "Come in." No hesitation, no second-guessing, just trust. And that was new. Dominic stepped inside, taking in the quiet of her space. It felt the same, grounded, intentional, but this time, he wasn't a visitor, he was part of the moment. They didn't sit close, didn't reach for anything. They just existed in the same space. "How was your day?" he asked. Zara leaned back slightly, exhaling. "Long." Dominic nodded. "Do you want to talk about it?" Zara shook her head gently. "Not really." A pause. "Okay," he said. No follow-up, no pressure, just understanding. And somehow, that made her feel more seen than anything else could have. She glanced at him. "You've really changed," she said. Dominic didn't respond immediately. Not because he didn't hear it, because he didn't feel the need to claim it. "I'm still changing," he said. Zara nodded. "I can tell." And for the first time, she wasn't saying it with hesitation. She was saying it with certainty. They stayed like that for a while. Quiet, not empty, just present. Eventually Zara shifted slightly, her gaze soft. "This feels different," she said. Dominic looked at her. "Yeah," he replied. A small pause. "It feels stable." Zara held his gaze. "Not perfect," she added. Dominic gave a faint smile. "I don't think it's supposed to be." Another pause. "But it feels real," he said. Zara nodded slowly. "Yeah, it does." And that was enough. Later that night, Dominic stood by the door, not rushing to leave, not trying to stay longer than necessary, just aware of the moment. "I'll see you," he said. Zara nodded. "Yeah." No promises, no expectations, just something understood. Dominic stepped out. The door closed softly behind him. Zara stood there for a moment, not thinking, just feeling, and what she felt wasn't overwhelming. It was steady, the kind of feeling that doesn't need to be questioned, because it doesn't create doubt. It removes it. Across the hallway, Dominic paused briefly, not because he was unsure, because he recognized something. This wasn't about getting her back. It wasn't about fixing what had been. It was about showing up, consistently, in something new. And for the first time, he understood how to do that. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Days later, they found themselves walking again. Same street, same quiet rhythm. But this time, they didn't stop at the corner. They kept going. And that was the final shift. Because before, their story had always paused, hesitated, waited for something to change. Now, it moved, not quickly, not dramatically, just forward, together, and for the first time, neither of them was thinking about what they had lost. They were focused on what they were building, not a second chance, something better, something that didn't rely on the past, because it was grounded in the present. And this time, they understood something they hadn't before. Love doesn't come back the same way. It comes back differently. When you're finally ready to hold it right, and when it does, you don't rush it, you don't force it, you just choose it again, but this time, correctly. Not every love story ends with losing someone. Sometimes it ends with becoming the person you needed to be, when it finally matters. Be honest. Do you believe in second chances after growth? Or do you think some timing mistakes can never be fixed? If you were Zara, would you choose this new version of love? Drop your answer in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective. And if this story stayed with you till the end, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson. Because sometimes, the right love doesn't come first. It comes when you're finally ready for it.